again?
Hi, yeah, we are going to send out a link during our presentation to where you can access it once it's been recorded. So we're going to be posting it onto our website. But we'll go over that in just a few. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
We'll get started shortly.
Thank you, Brooke.
All right, is everyone ready to get started?
Yes.
Yay! All right, well, welcome and good afternoon. We would like to get started. Thank you for attending our first ever K-State Garden Hour. It is so amazing to see how many participants we have, and I think the number just keeps climbing as everyone continues to join this afternoon. I almost said this morning, but it's afternoon now. K-State Garden Hour, it's hosted by Kansas State Research and Extension. My name is Brooke Garcia, and I will be your host today. I have been involved on the team who has conceptualized this idea from the very beginning. I am a horticulturist by trade, graduated from Kansas State University in the Department of Horticulture, but currently I work as a training support specialist in the Department of Entomology at K-State. I know I can speak on behalf of our team, but we are so excited to begin this series. We probably should have done this years ago, but this truly was founded out of a need to continue to provide extension education related to horticulture and gardening, especially in these uncertain times, with COVID-19. We can't be face-to-face with you, so we wanted to find a way to still do that and provide this education. So everyone involved in the development of this series is an extension professional for K-State. Most of us have a background in horticulture education or some related discipline, but most of all, just like each and every one of you, we have a love for gardening and the natural environment. So every week we will have a new topic related to gardening. Our goal is to meet the needs of new gardeners as well as seasoned gardeners alike. You will be able to find additional topics on our website. I'll go ahead and have our moderator send out this link over the chat. We do have a website on the K-State website through Horticulture Extension that has the upcoming topics for the various weeks. You may have been able to find this event via Facebook. We have also been posting this series onto the K-State Horticulture and Natural Resources Facebook page. And you can find all the upcoming events and the series for the series on that page. This will be a great resource for you to follow and easily register for upcoming series. I'll also have Travis send that in the chat as well, so you have both of those website links. All right, so batting onto the Facebook, just be sure to like and share and use the hashtag K-State Garden Hour to really help us promote this series. We are very excited about it and we put a lot of time into developing it. So before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping things. And if you've done some Zoom calls, you've probably heard the same information before. Just be sure to keep yourself on mute throughout the entirety of the presentation. It just will help eliminate the background noise and eliminate those distractions from our presenter. We have a lot of participants, 323 and climbing. We had 500 and like 70 something registered for this, but there is a max of 500, so it'll kind of just cut off, and that's where we wanted to make sure people could access the session afterwards. With that being said, it might be in your best interest just to turn off your video. This could just help with the overall internet broadband and connectivity, especially for those in rural areas. It can really help kind of speed things up. As previously mentioned, we do have a moderator today. Our moderator is Travis Carmichael. He is a K-State Extension agent. And if you have any questions throughout the entire presentation, please send them over the chat. There is an ability to do a drop down and send those messages privately to our moderator, Travis, if you don't want your questions to be public. And he will be keeping track of all those questions that come in, and we will have an optional Q&A session towards the very end of our presentation. All right, so how about we get started? I know that was just a lot of words, right? But I know the real reason you're here is to learn about native plants, and I'm sure most of you are anxious to get back in your garden. So I am pleased to introduce our first topic of the series, native plants in the landscape. Pam Paulsen, a horticulture extension agent in Reno County, Kansas, will be our presenter today. And Pam will cover a number of native plant species and how they can be used in your landscape. She's an avid gardener and an advocate for using native plants in the landscape as much as possible. Thank you, Pam, so much for your willingness to present and educate us today. You can begin as soon as you're ready. And just if you guys give us a few moments while we transition, and she'll start sharing her screen with us.
Okay. Okay, I hope everybody can see this. Like Brooke said, I'm Pam Paulsen. I'm originally from Manhattan, Kansas, but have lived here in Hutchinson for over 20 years and have really been trying to turn my backyard into more natives. I love going out wandering on our prairie, and if you look really close, you can see some amazing plants. It's not just green grass that's out there. But we have a lot of beautiful natives that make really nice landscape plants for us as well. So I'm going to talk just a little bit. I'm not covering the landscaping part of it, but more just about the plants that you can use in your landscape. So first of all, just what are native plants? They're not the same as wild plants or wildflowers. Those, wild plants can come from seeds that are imported and then they just keep reseeding. Some of our native plants will do the same, but not all native plants are considered, or not, I guess backwards, not all wild plants are considered native plants here. But there are a number of definitions for native plants, and you kind of need to decide what you want to make your definition for when you're thinking about putting natives in your own garden. So they can be plant species living on North American continent before European settlement. That's generally the broad definition of native plants in a botanical sense, before humans had an input in deciding what plants went where. So they can be plant species indigenous to a given area, or plants that occur naturally in a particular area where they've evolved in that space. They can be adapted just to local conditions. So different rainfall amounts, if you've got a wet area or if it's in a wooded area, will be much different than what are native to a dry or a prairie area. Their hardiness zone will also affect where they evolve from, as well the soil type. So when you're thinking about your own native garden, you kind of need to decide what you want your definition of natives to be. So whether they're native to the United States, which you may have a little bit of difficulty picking plants from different parts of the country, native to your own state, native to your region, or this is kind of where I fall, is native to your ecosystem. So here in Hutchinson, we're about equal distance from the Flint Hills and from the Gyp Hills. We've got some sand hills here too. And so we have a wide range of plants in our area that will do well here, but then there's also some that will not do well here. But really your best bet when you're trying to grow plants that will do well in your area is looking about your region or your ecosystem. There are also cultivated varieties of natives, and that's up to you whether you want to consider that as part of your native garden or not. So there are a number of benefits of using native plants in your gardens. They're very less resource intensive because those plants have evolved in our area, in our conditions. They need less water, less fertilizer, less pesticides because they have adapted to our growing areas. They really don't need any scheduled mowing or watering. So if you're wanting to change out a lawn area to natives, you'll greatly reduce your inputs that way. Most of our natives have very deep roots, so when we get into the heat of the summertime, they usually can tolerate that much better than some of our non-native plants, and especially some of our lawn grasses as well. They are not no maintenance though, they are low maintenance. So if we do get a drought or hot periods, they do need some watering and a little bit of help during those times. But they are less time intensive. If you're thinking about switching out a lawn to native areas or a high maintenance garden area, then your time and your inputs will be reduced. So the average homeowner spends about 40 hours a year just mowing the lawn, where switching out to natives will greatly reduce that. And they are less costly when you think about how long they will last and the fewer inputs that you'll need. So this is a case study from Nebraska. A public library in Lincoln, Nebraska converted 2.5 acres of a bluegrass turf to native buffalo grass turf and mixed prairie plantings, where bluegrass is a high water user and needs regular fertilizing to look nice. So what they found is they reduced 1.5 million gallons of water per year, reduced 800 pounds of fertilizer per year, and reduced 5 gallons of concentrated pesticides a year by switching from bluegrass to buffalo grass and to mixed prairie plantings. So there are other benefits of native plants. They're great for the environment, great for your soil ecology. They support a great deal of native insects, which also support birds and wildlife. Most of our native insects evolved with our native plants, and so those are the plants that they prefer for their food sources. Most of the insects are specialists, and they do have a specific relationship with specific types of plants. And no two species have the same leaf chemistry. So insects have adapted their life cycle to go along with the life cycle of our native plants. They also are very good for improving our soil. Because you're not mowing or trimming constantly, they do improve the soil fertility. They're a great source of carbon storage because those leaves and those roots that aren't tilled up or aren't mowed are a great carbon sink or great carbon storage. Those deeper roots for our native plants really increase stormwater infiltration, so it really decreases runoff. And they're great for just loosening up our soil. So if you think about a lawn, 1 hour of lawn mowing equals 20 miles driven back and forth over the same soil, which can greatly compact that soil. So when you have compacted soil, what happens is water goes in, but it reaches that barrier and it just runs off, taking off topsoil, taking off nutrients, goes into groundwater and surface water sources, and can cause a lot of pollution that way. But if you look at our native plants, these are how deep their roots go, some up to 14 or 15 feet. On the very far left of this is our turf grass, our Kentucky bluegrass. And because it gets mowed on a regular basis, those roots never get a chance to really go deep and have the benefit of many of our native plants do. So when you're thinking about a native plant landscape, one, you want to identify your native plant goals or your landscaping goals. So are you wanting to attract pollinators, attract other types of wildlife, or if you're just wanting to reduce your maintenance, are some things to consider when you're thinking about what types of plants you want to add. The other is to look at whether you want to just incorporate natives into your existing landscape or replace some of your non-native plants that aren't doing well, or if you want to just totally clear the slate and start brand new with all natives. So that's another, or a few other things to think about when you're deciding what plants you want to use. So then you want to really look at your site and what type of characteristics you have. So if you've got sunny areas, shady areas, if some areas are windy or wet, all of that will factor into the types of plants that you choose as well. Your soil, I always recommend having a soil test done. If you haven't had one done in a while, or if you're having issues with plant growth, or if you're starting a new area, which if you're switching from non-natives to natives, that would be, to me, that's considered starting a new area. So I always recommend having a soil test done, and you can get that done through your local extension office. And then look at your appropriate plant selection. So you want to plant plants that have similar growing needs together. So if they're full sun, prefer dry soils, you want to plant those together as opposed to planting some that prefer more water with plants that prefer to stay dry, because somebody's going to be struggling along the way. Look at practical and strategic turf areas. So you have some walking paths, it leaves some open space around your gardens. Proper planting is important as well. So most of these native plants do not like to stay wet and do not like to have their crowns too deep in the soil. So don't plant too deep, especially if you have heavy clay soils. Mulch lightly, and then I like to give them just a little bit of water, for a couple weeks at least, until they get their roots start growing and getting established. And then again, they do need some maintenance. They're not no maintenance, but usually it's mostly water, especially getting established, and then during the hot, dry time. So drip irrigation is a great way to provide that for the plants, especially if you don't have them on a regular scheduled timer, but only apply when needed. Weed control, many of these plants take a little bit of time to get established, so you want to clear the weeds out before you plant and then keep the weeds down as they're getting established. And then usually I like to leave them in the winter time because they're a great nesting site for many of our beneficial insects, and they have some great winter characteristics too. But then in the springtime, most of them can be cut down 2 to 4 inches, and then they start up from there. So when you're looking at your native plants, again, your plants should match your site or your growing conditions. The other thing you want to look at is succession of bloom, because most of our native plants are perennials, that they come back every year from the root mass rather than reseeding. So they're only going to bloom for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe. Some will bloom a little bit longer or sporadically through the growing season, but you want to look at bloom time. If you were to go out in the prairie every 2 to 3 weeks, you would see something different blooming. And that's kind of what you want to work at in your garden, is to have something blooming throughout the whole growing season. Many of our landscape plants have different forms and textures, so even if they're not blooming, that can provide some great interest in the garden. Planting with some interesting lines, so sweeping or curving garden bed lines, edges, using a rock edging or something like that that can lead your eye through the garden, or it can also be used to highlight some unique features in your plants. And then complementary colors. I suggest planting the colors that you like, but then taking a look at the color wheel and planting things that are opposite from each other are a great way to provide some complementary colors to your garden. And then be intentional about your plant height, because you want things to still stay in scale. So kind of rule of thumb is the width of your garden bed. You don't want your plants to be any taller than half of that. So if you've got a 6-foot garden bed, you don't want your plants, their mature height, to get more than 3 feet. If they get too big or too long or too tall, they just look out of place that way. There will be a few that shoot up, and I'll talk about them in a little bit, that shoot up a tall flower stalk, but mostly their foliage will stay smaller than that. So those are a few things to look at. If you've got some screening you want to do, think about the height of your plants that way as well. Okay, we are going to go through, the rest of this is just going to be different native plants that you can plant in your garden. I'm going to stop real quick and ask Travis if we have any questions to answer before we get to that though.
We got none at this time.
Okay.
Would you mind just going back to the slide with the plant roots, just so we can see the plant root links again?
Sure.
Perfect. I think that covered for Gretchen Johnson. She wanted to see that slide again.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if you Google native plant roots or prairie plant roots, a number of versions of that picture will come up too. So. Okay, so I kind of go through this generally, not real specifically, but generally by bloom time. So the earlier blooming plants to the later blooming plants is kind of how this runs through. So these are some native plants that do well in full sun. And this one is Blue Star or Amsonia. And there's a few different species that do really well here. This first one on the left is a variety called Blue Ice. It's Amsonia tabernae montana. And the Blue Ice is a shorter one that gets maybe 6 to 8 inches tall. There's also just regular Blue Star that probably gets maybe 2 feet tall. It's got a little bit wider leaves, but they come out with these beautiful blue flowers. Mine are just getting done blooming, but they've probably been blooming for the last 3 or 4 weeks. They're one of the earlier ones that come up. On the right is the threadleaf Blue Star with really fine foliage, but you can see the fall color in it too. So in the springtime, it provides beautiful blue colors, but in the fall, it provides a beautiful yellow foliage. Missouri Evening Primrose is a really nice ground cover, and there's a number of other primroses. There's a pink one that you often see on the roadside, the showy evening primrose. That one can get a little bit invasive, but the Missouri Evening Primrose and there's a few other yellow ones that grow at varying heights, but the Missouri Evening Primrose has flowers that get probably 3 to 4 inches across, and then they get really unique seed pods afterwards. But this one will bloom. Mine are just starting to bloom now, and they'll bloom off and on probably for a month or so. But these maybe get 4 inches across, but they'll spread probably a good foot to 18 inches. Fremont's clematis is a nice short growing clematis. It's not a vining one, so it probably gets maybe 8 to 10 inches tall and really nice little drooping flowers. And then they get seed heads that kind of open up like a little spike. And I need to include a picture of the seed head in here, but they'll start blooming probably in a few weeks or so, and then that seed head will last even longer. So they provide a little bit extended interest. Then the blue false indigos. This is one that's just started coming out on the market probably in the last 10 or so years as an ornamental. These are one of the prettiest ones in the prairie, I think, and they're just starting to bloom now. So the one on the right is probably the common one that you see in the prairie. There's also a yellow one that's a little bit shorter, and a white one that they're a little more droopy, but they've been breeding and hybridizing some to be landscape plants. So the first one, the original blue false indigo for the landscape, gets huge. When I planted mine, I've got a little bed in my backyard, and I put it in, and it probably got 6 feet wide and about 5 feet tall, and kind of crowded everybody else out. But now they've been starting to develop some dwarf ones that are a little bit better behaved and maybe get 2 feet tall and 2 feet across. But about this time, they start putting up these really nice spiked flowers. They're in the legume family, so they look like sweet pea flowers. And because they're legumes, they add some good nitrogen to your soil. but they're also developing some that are in different colors. So this one on the left is a chocolate one. So it's kind of a reddish yellow. There's just a pure yellow one, some darker versions of the purple as well. But they make a really nice, just kind of a shrub. They will die back to the ground, so I don't throw them in with the shrubs. They're more of a herbaceous plant, but a really unique look and some really pretty colors in the garden. Rose verbena is a perennial verbena, and so it makes great edging in the garden. It probably doesn't get more than 4 to 6 inches tall, but it'll spread, each plant will spread maybe a foot or so, and then just covered in these little purple clusters of flowers. So these are great if you've got a little rock wall too, they'll kind of hang over it. And then purple poppy mallow, these are ones that again can spread if they're allowed to. They're also called wine cups because they come out with these little wine colored flowers, and again maybe 4 inches tall, but then they spread if they're allowed to and have a good growing area. They can spread up to probably 4 or 5 feet, but they're pretty easy to keep tamed and to trim back. I've got some on my flower bed that are just on the edge of it, and if they get into the lawn, I just mow them over, and they're taken care of that way. Then purple prairie clover is just a nice little bunching plant. Maybe gets a foot tall or so, has a really unique scent to it. But again, this is in the legume family, so it's very good for enriching your soil with some nitrogen, and really great for attracting pollinators. Anything in the legume family or the mint family do really attract all kinds of insects to the garden. There's also a white version of this, and these probably start blooming early June or so. And then spotted bee balm, this one is in the mint family. This is a low grower. I would probably put this on the edge of a garden because it doesn't compete very well with other plants, but it'll start blooming probably late May, early spring, and just kind of whitish flowers, but little tinge of purple with them. There are other bee balms that can just take over an area, and this one is not aggressive at all. And then lemon paintbrush, I'm starting to see these blooming now. These I usually see in the Gyp Hills and in the very south central part of the state. Very unique, bright lemon yellow plants. These are related to the orange paintbrush that grows up in the mountains, but this is our prairie version. So I've not seen these on the market very much, but starting to see them spread up into, you know, our area and probably more northwest part of the state. Take very poor soils and very dry areas. And then prairie onion. This is a true onion, but it's a native. They don't get a whole lot bigger than their flower heads than what's seen in the picture. They might get just maybe 1.5 inches or so across for the seed head. And these come up just about now, probably another few weeks we'll really start seeing them bloom as well. These are ones that you want to kind of plant in a clump to get a better show. But again, onion family is another one that is really great for attracting pollinators and many of our beneficial insects. Then scarlet globe mallow. These I usually start blooming mid-June or so. Very bright orange. They get maybe 6 to 8 inches tall, up to 10 inches tall. These are ones that if you deadhead them, they'll bloom sporadically, probably through August. And then yarrow. The yarrow is just starting to bloom now. This is the white one, which is our native prairie one. There are also many hybrids, and so you can find all different colors now in yellows and pinks. This dark red one is called paprika. And these are very tough. They take our heat, take our drought, and take our wind very well. They can get maybe a foot, 1.5 feet tall at the most, and just have these nice clusters of flower heads. And prairie smoke is a really unique flower. These are just getting towards the end of their bloom period, and they put out these little pink flowers that are kind of drooping, but then once the petals have dropped, their seed heads have these nice wispy parts to them. Then I guess is where the smoke name comes from, because it just looks like smoke when you look at them. But low growing clusters, they will spread just a little bit, but again, not invasive or intrusive. But these are ones, again, I'd kind of put them on an edge because they don't really compete very well with other plants. So give them just a little bit of room where they can show. Ohio spiderwort is another one that has that real pretty blue color. This one is also called cow slobber because if you break the leaves and feel the sap, it feels like cow slobber, I guess. But real pretty blue color. It's will take some shade. Will also take wet areas, and so this one will do will grow in a wide variety of areas in the garden because it will take some dry areas as well. And maybe get a foot tall and spread about a foot as well. Woolly verbena is in the mint family, and as you can see, it's great for attracting pollinators. There are a few different species of verbena that you can grow in your garden, and these usually start blooming about early June, early to mid-June. And if you plant some of the different species, you can keep that look in your garden through August or so. Just a nice spike flower. The flowers start at the bottom and work their way up. And so they provide a real unique texture to the garden with that real upright look to them. And then the milkweeds usually start blooming late May to June. This is butterfly milkweed, and different parts of the state, they'll bloom yellow or orange. And these are ones that the monarch butterflies prefer. Monarchs will only lay their eggs, and their larvae will only feed off of plants in the milkweed family. So these will maybe a foot tall or so to about 2 feet wide, just a nice mounding look to them. This is the common milkweed, and real pretty pink clusters of flowers. They have a beautiful scent in the evening. Mine are just starting to put flower buds on now. When they were about 4 inches out of the ground, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the monarchs started laying eggs on them, and I've had caterpillars feeding on them for the last couple of weeks now. But this is one of the preferred plants, one of the preferred milkweeds even for the monarchs. These can, once they start to elongate with their flowers, they can get up to 6 to 8 feet tall, and they will kind of flop around. Usually once they stop blooming, I cut them back so they're a little bit better behaved. And then this is a spider milkweed. This one is just starting to bloom now as well, and stays low growing, but has a very unique flower cluster to it. They may get 10 inches or so, 10 to 12 inches tall, and probably about 15 inches wide. And again, this is one that does not compete very well with other plants, but it usually comes up early enough that if you put it on an edge of the garden, you can see it, and then it does just fine kind of being an understory plant to others as they grow up and around it. Then our cone flowers, these are ones that are probably some of the longer blooming in the landscape. So this is just our common purple coneflower, Echinacea purpurea. This is the pale purple coneflower, Echinacea pallida. These get a little bit taller, where the purpurea maybe get 18 inches or 20 to 24 inches. These can get about 3 feet tall, have bigger flower heads, but long, skinny, drooping petals. And then this is the yellow purple coneflower. So it's Echinacea paradoxa because they're yellow instead of purple. And these probably get 2 to 3 feet tall as well. And then this is the narrow leaf coneflower, or the Echinacea angustifolia. This is another one, probably the most common one that we see out in the prairie. Very similar to the Echinacea purpurea, where they get about 2 feet or so. These tend to spread quite a bit in better fertile soils. So these are ones that you might have to pull out a few plants and share with your friends if they start to get out of hand. Then there are a number of gay feathers or liatris. They'll start blooming usually in mid-June or so, and these you can plant a number of varieties and have them blooming usually through early September. But again, these provide just a nice spike look, a nice upright narrow look to the garden. And then sneezeweed is one of our later blooming flowers. So usually late July, August is when these start to bloom. They come in a really nice variety of colors of oranges, reds, and yellows. They will get probably between 18 to 24 inches tall. I've seen some get, especially the yellow ones, get probably 2.5 feet tall. But these are really nice because the flowers are up above the foliage, and so they make a really nice colorful display. And again, great for attracting pollinators in the garden. And then black-eyed Susan, or the Rudbeckia. There's a number of varieties of Rudbeckia that you can grow. This is just our common black-eyed Susan one. These will, again, tend to spread similar to the Echinacea angustifolia, but it's really easy to pull out some of those plants and relocate them or share them. They won't crowd out other plants, but they will take advantage of open areas that they can grow in. This is upright prairie coneflower. This is a little bit more delicate texture. There's some that maybe get a foot tall or so. There's a gray-headed coneflower that looks very similar that can get up to 2 to 3 feet tall, but similar flower color and shape. And then these are the silphiums. This one is called prairie dock. I've also heard it called prairie hosta because it has foliage that's similar to a hosta, really large blade-shaped leaves, and make a real stunning look in the garden just because of their foliage. And then they will start putting up a seed stalk or a flower stalk, usually July or so. And as you can see in the picture, they get pretty tall. So usually you'll have to stake up the flower stalk when it starts going, because mine last year probably got 7 feet tall, but then they put up a shoot of these sunflower type flowers all up along the flower stalk. And then this one is related, called compass plant, another silphium. Very, their leaves have real deep notches in them. They're called compass plant because they orient east to west just to maximize their sunlight. They, again, late summer, early fall, will put up these long flower stalks, again, that get probably 7 feet tall, and then just covered with these small sunflower type blooms. The flowers themselves maybe get 2 inches across or so. But again, like the prairie dock, just really neat foliage, really neat texture to have in the garden. And then this one is rattlesnake master. Has foliage similar to yucca. It's not quite as invasive as yucca can be, but then really unique seed heads. Probably late June or so, they'll start putting up their seed heads through July. And then Joe Pieweed. I usually don't recommend the common Joe Pieweed because that one will spread and is invasive and can take over and crowd out other plants. But there are a number that hybrids now that are dwarfs. There's one called Little Joe. The common one can probably get 4 to 5 feet tall, and it can continue to spread to 8 feet or so, where Little Joe maybe gets 2 feet tall and about that spread, and isn't nearly as aggressive as the common one. This one will start blooming August or so. So it's great for providing nectar and pollen for migrating pollinators that are starting to head south. And then this is the Leavenworth Oringo. This is again another unique plant. It looks kind of cactus-like or more yucca-like, but then gets these little pineapple-shaped flower heads, flower clusters on the top, and they're just this beautiful purple color. And again, we'll take dry, poor soils. And then goldenrod is one of those that blooms fairly late, so late August through September. These often get mistaken for ragweed because they bloom at the same time, but these are not the ones that cause you to sneeze in the fall. These are insect pollinated because once you look at them, you will see them covered with all kinds of pollinators, from beetles to butterflies to moths. But really nice yellow color. There's a number of varieties, a number of species that you can grow. This one is Little Lemon. That's a real bright yellow, and it's a dwarf. And it's probably one of the earlier blooming ones. So late July is when I've seen mine bloom. There's a Canadian one and a tall goldenrod as well that can get probably 5 or 6 feet tall. And then this is blue pitcher sage. It's one of our latest blooming prairie plants. Beautiful blue color. This one, I always see the monarchs as they're migrating. I see the monarchs get attracted to these. Usually September or when these start blooming. And probably get about 2 to 3 feet tall. And this is just some of the blue pitcher sage with our wild sunflowers. So this is that complementary colors on that color wheel. So the yellows and the blues make a beautiful pattern together. And then this is ironweed. Again, this is another one that's very late blooming, so September or so, and just beautiful clusters of blue flowers that sit up above the foliage. So they really make a really nice show because of that. The flowers sit up high, and so you just see this beautiful sea of purple. And then this is probably our latest blooming for our perennials are the asters. This one is aromatic aster. And again, this is one that those migrating pollinators tend to flock to as they head south. And so these will bloom up until we get a frost, and they'll even take a light frost and still continue to bloom. So usually through October is when you'll see them. And we do have a few native plants that do well in the shade. So woodland phlox, those are probably just getting done blooming now. So they will start blooming usually through April. They'll take wet areas. They will grow in sunnier areas, but these are ones that bloom very well in the shade too. Ragwort is one that I'm always surprised when I see it blooming in the shade because it looks like a full sun plant, but does very well in dry areas, wet areas, full sun, as well as shade. Short little plant, gets a little rosette of leaves and then puts up a flower stalk, but still maybe only 10 to 12 inches tall with the flowers. Golden Alexander's is a member of the parsley family, but it is a perennial. And so this is one that swallowtails will lay its larva on. But these will do full sun, part shade, and will bloom throughout. These are ones that you can cut back the flowers when they're done blooming, and then they will put up another flush of flowers. And they're very long blooming. Mine have probably been blooming since early April, and they still provide a nice show of yellow in the garden. They do tend to spread. They're not aggressive, but they will fill in and spread to whatever space they're allowed. Wild geranium, and there's a number of hybrids now that are very showy, and they usually bloom about April through early May. And then the wild columbines, and there's a wide variety of columbines as well. They're starting to bloom now, and depending on the varieties you get, you can get them blooming usually through early July. but yellows, blues, all kinds of colors with the columbines. And then this is a wild bergamot. This is one that will spread and take over an area if you let it, but just pale blue, purplish color flowers. Usually about now they're starting to bloom. And this one is in the mint family, so great for pollinators and beneficial insects. And then woodland aster is more of a white aster, and again blooms September through October. And then there are a number of native grasses that do really nice in the landscape. This is big blue stem, gets a real pretty purple color in the fall. They can get 6 to 8 feet tall though, so they do need some good space. They will make a nice screen if you're needing to do that. Switchgrass, there have been a number of switchgrass varieties that have been bred for the landscape. Switchgrass is great because it'll take very wet soils to very dry soils. So Northwind is one that's nice and upright. Cheyenne Sky has a purplish reddish color to it. Dallas Blues has kind of a grayish green color. And then in the fall, a real pretty purple seed head. Little blue stem has not been a good landscape plant for a while because if they're not grown in tight clusters, they just kind of flop over. But they've been breeding some now that maintain that upright shape, and then really unique seed heads in the fall. Then Indian grass is one that has a really nice upright growth to it. I think it's a great substitute for the Carl Forester grass that's often grown in the landscape. And then beautiful bright orange seed heads in the fall. These probably get 5 to 6 feet tall or so. And then prairie dropseed is a real fine textured grass, but it's beautiful when it blows in the wind. And then just a few native shrubs. So our sumacs are native. This is a hybrid, the tiger eye sumac that has very bright yellow foliage. You need to be careful with sumacs because their roots will spread and then pop up. You know, the shrubs will pop up in your neighbor's yard or elsewhere because they do kind of have a long run. These tiger eye sumacs don't get very big, maybe 8 feet to 10 feet tall, but they're very thin, so they don't take up a whole lot of space. Oak leaf hydrangea. The common ones, the standard ones, can get pretty good size, 8 feet tall and 8 foot spread probably, but there's some dwarf ones now. But this is our native hydrangea where others can struggle, other hydrangeas can. This one does great. It will take part shade and puts up big, beautiful white flower clusters, but then in the fall, they have beautiful purple and red foliage. Beautyberry is a nice weeping shrub. Usually you don't see the flowers very well. They're just little tight clusters up along the stalk, but then late summer, early fall, you'll start to see the purple berries, and they intensify in color as the temperatures cool down. Serviceberry is probably my favorite of our native shrubs. They usually bloom about April or so, so that's where they get their name, is they bloom about Easter service. But they're also called Juneberry because they put out this delicious fruit in June. Similar to a blueberry, where blueberries we really struggle to grow here, serviceberries do very well. And beautiful fall color, oranges to reds to purples. They can be grown as a large shrub to 8 feet or so, or just as a small tree. Lead plant is one of our prairie plants. This is in the legume family, and they're not the showiest, but now they're breeding some that have really nice, thicker flower clusters on the top, kind of a purplish gray, and then the foliage is a nice gray color too. And then buttonbush puts out very unique seed heads that look like little spikelets, little round spikelets. These will take dry or wet areas and maybe get 10 feet tall, 8 to 10 feet tall, and about 6 foot spread. And then these are just some samples of landscapes using native plants, and I'm going to go through these kind of quick so we have some time for questions at the end. But here you can see they've got the Missouri evening primrose and some salvias in here. Here they've used the rudbeckia and some of the grasses, and then there's echinacea and some rudbeckias. And these are some of the grasses in here. They've got some sedums, so this is kind of mixed. There's some artemisian sedums that are mixed, so it's not just native plants, but they work very well with many of our other ornamental plants too. This is the ironweed in the back with the pale purple clone flowers. And then the prairie onions with the echinacea. And then this is agastache in the front here. And then the orange butterfly milkweed with the yellow echinacea. And then this is the monarda, or the bee balm, with some coreopsis in the yellow. And then here on the far left is one of the wild type sunflowers, but in the front is the eastern grandma grass, and they have very unique seed heads. And then again, some of the echinacea, and then that is purple leaf plum with the foliage. But in just next to the echinacea over here, you can see that prairie dock. So you can see the unique foliage in there. And then this is a mix of some of the echinaceas. And then the rudbeckia. And then our grasses. Even if you just do grasses, we have such a wide variety of grass types that really provide some unique textures. This is later in the season when their seed heads really start to shine. And then this is the tiger eye sumac in the back with these grasses here. But even in the fall and the winter time, many of our native plants have some unique texture to them. And I think that's it. So if there's any questions, you're welcome to unmute, or this is my contact information here if you have questions later on.
Thank you so much. It was really informational. I didn't get very many notes written. Will there be ability to get the slides?
This is being recorded, so you can.
Okay.
And I do have, I think Travis is going to post the link. I did make a handout with just the list of the plants and then just a list of resources of native plant books and where you can get some of the native plants.
Yes, I'm going to post that again into the chat
Awesome.
for everyone to have. And then I got several questions that have been sent in.
Okay.
So I will work my way through that. As I scroll up, we had several questions, and another agent did answer this, but I'll have you answer it as I go back through the questions. Some locations of where we can purchase the native plants either in plant form or by seed, Pam.
Okay. And that is on that resources handout. There are a number of places for our area here. Dick Arboretum does a native plant sale twice a year. Sharp Brothers Seed, which is in Healy, Kansas, provides seed for native plants. I also like Prairie Moon Nursery up in Minnesota. I prefer to get plants from our area just because that's where they've grown. But Prairie Moon is really nice because if you've got a certain area, they can give you great suggestions and will even do like a seed mix for you. But they also do provide plants.
All right.
I don't know if I can pull that up and share that even.
Yeah. One question was, are cultivars of native plants really considered Kansas native plants?
Partly, you know, and again, that's, you know, those definitions for native is pretty wide. So that's more of a personal definition. You know, they've been hybridized from some of our natives or hybridized between natives and some that maybe are not native to our area. So, that's just a personal choice for when you're growing in your garden.
Okay, on the Amsonia, can you trim them back to help them fill out? Someone has some tall, leggy ones.
Yeah, you can. When I found mine to be tall, leggy, usually they aren't getting enough light. But you can trim them back a little bit. Usually they're blooming pretty soon before they get too tall, and then they kind of grow up around them. But if you wait till after they bloom and then trim them, then they should be able to bush out a little bit better.
Okay. Next question is meadow phlox a native plant?
The woodland phlox
is,
yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see. How best can you divide yarrow? That might be a.
Usually they tend to kind of disappear in the landscape later on in the season. So once they bloom is about the best time. And if it's a large area, what I've done before is just dig the whole thing up and kind of tease it apart and replant some of it and pot up the rest of it. It is one that kind of shocks quite a bit, but give it some time and you'll start to see some new growth come up.
Okay, let's see. Do you have any tricks on getting milkweed to grow? It can be somewhat tricky for an individual.
Once you get started, especially that common milkweed, I'm looking out my window right now, and I started with one, and there's probably 100 coming up. If you can get them in small containers, they don't transplant really well. So the smaller the container, the smaller plant that you can start with, the better. They especially the taller ones, the common, and oh, it just went out of my head. Those larger ones have such deep, extensive roots that they don't move very well. But what I found is the smaller they are, the better they transplant. So,
okay.
I don't know if that answered. That's a lot of words for.
I think you actually answered that and a couple other questions.
Okay.
Answered that. Oh, what pollinators do service berries attract, and does the fruit make a mess?
They will attract bees. I've seen bumblebees on mine. The fruit doesn't last to make a mess. I always try and pick mine, and the robins will clear it in a day. So I feel lucky when I can harvest some fruit off of it, because it does attract birds, and they will eat it. So it doesn't have a chance to fall.
Okay. Any suggestions on how to contain lily of the valley?
That one, once you get it, it will take over. You almost have to dig the whole thing up, because that does spread by roots. So it's when, to really get rid of it, it probably takes some chemical spray, or to really seriously dig up the roots. The best places I've seen to plant those are areas that are, a little planting area that's maybe surrounded by concrete or a driveway, so it can't spread into other areas. That one's pretty aggressive.
Okay. Is there any bergamot that is resistant to powdery mildew?
Yeah, I don't know if some of the newer hybrids are. There was a short one, and I can't remember the name. I think it was supposed to be. Those are ones, if you give them some good open area to grow in, they don't get as affected by it, but sometimes that means thinning it out a little bit. But yeah, they tend to get powdery mildew pretty easily.
All right, I think
that was everything. I tried to scroll back through as well.
if we come
Well,
across
since
any,
we're coming towards the time, the end of the presentation, I just want to say thank you, Pam. I know most of us are living here in Kansas or living in the prairie, and it's really fun to see so many familiar plants. I know I was hiking on my parents' land the other day, and I saw some false blue indigo blooming, and it just always, makes me smile. That's one of my favorite native plants. So like I said, our time's coming to a close. We're approaching that 1 o'clock time. If we didn't make it to your question, or if you didn't feel comfortable asking, you can email our team. Our email is ksuemg@ksu.edu, and Travis will send that over the chat. You're more than welcome to reach out to us. Give me just a moment. I'm going to screen share a slide. Let's see. All right, so this is some of the resources that continue to kind of get sent out throughout the chat today. But the first one that will take you to the, the K-State Extension Reno website, and it's got the Lawn Dash Garden. And I noticed that several of the links that got sent were within that website. So this might just be a good thing to snap a photo of or snap a screenshot of for your own reference. The second link is the Facebook page where all the events in the series will be posted. The third bullet point is the actual Garden Hour website. So you can go to that website and then click K-State Garden Hour, and it will give you the ability to also view the remainder of some of the sessions that we have in this series. All right. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining in today. We will be sending out an evaluation in the email that you registered with. We would really appreciate your feedback. With this being the first topic in our series, we did expect some learning curves, but it really went smoothly today. I'm very happy with the outcome. I know Zoom can be really confusing, and this truly is a new tool that we are all mastering, one day at a time. I hope you guys will join us again soon. This series will run every Wednesday from 12 to 1 through the summer, and we hope to continue it for a long, long time into the fall, and, for who knows how long. Next week, our topic is taking care of tomatoes, and we will have Tom Bowler, who is a Douglas County Horticulture Extension Agent, and we'll have Judy O'Mara. She is the Plant Disease Diagnostic Lab diagnostician. They'll be providing some maintenance techniques, and the goal is to help you improve your tomato plant health while also increasing plant yield. Tom will cover the task such as training, irrigating, pruning, and insect management, and Judy will discuss some tomato diseases that occur in Kansas and how to manage them. Thank you so much. I will be ending this meeting for everyone, so we hope to see you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Brooke, before we end, yes, we do need everyone to register each week for
Oh, thank you.
and it was a question that just came in. That's why I popped in. So
Yes. So if you go to those two links that I had shared, and you go to the Facebook page, and it's K-State Horticulture and Natural Resources. So it's the H&R website on Facebook. That will give you the ability to link to our website as well as register for upcoming ones. But you do have to register for each session. All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your week.